Well, it's been 6 years since COVID officially hit. We shut down the government, shut down the state, and shut down most of the country. But what have we learned from all that? And are we ready for the next pandemic? Well, joining us on the news line is our good friend, former Republican State Senator Jim Merritt, co-host of State House Happenings, and just a heck of a great guy altogether. I don't know how his wife puts up with him, to be brutally honest with you, but people say the same thing about my wife, lovely Mrs. Shabazz, as well. So, Jim, my friend, how's it going?
It's going very well. It started writing this book 4 years ago. Once the final and the 70th executive order had been written, closing down the pandemic in the state of Indiana by Governor Holcomb. And it took 4 years, massive amount of research. And as you know, I've got other things going on. So it was, I'm not going to say it was a labor of love for society.
By the way, I guess we could have to give the title of the book as well, since we're talking about it. What was the title of the book again?
It's called Lessons Learned. Lessons Learned. Are we ready for the next pandemic? History says no, and it's available on Amazon.com.
So why not give the whole thing away? Otherwise, people wouldn't want to buy the book. We'll just wait for the movie to come out. So let's go back to 6 years ago. I remember exactly where I was. We were on the House floor, and the word started to come down. Everything was starting to shut down, and that's pretty much it.
Right. And March 3rd, there was some criticism from the Democrat caucus in the Indiana Senate about the Governor Holcomb, not doing anything about this new flu-like. They just didn't know what it was, and they didn't know it was going to be a pandemic. And I went to the microphone, took my laptop to the microphone in the Indiana Senate, and brought up the web page that the governor's administration had created, that they were starting to learn more about what turned out to be COVID-19. And then we signed died on March 11th, and soon thereafter, the president shut down the economy. And I stepped away from the Indiana Senate in November of 2020. And what I experienced from March 11th all the way to November 5th or 6th, whenever I left, I resigned, was chaotic. It was confusing. People were flying blind. This book, Lessons Learned, is not it's not a punitive, it's not critical. And there's a couple of times that I'm critical, but it is the idea that we went through a pandemic, and the world did, this country did, and the state did. And in those 2 years when I was just a citizen, Hoosier citizen, I was waiting for a after action report or some sort of commission that would look back and tell us what we did right and what we did wrong. And as I say in the book, about the only way that the Holcomb administration recognized that we had just gone through a pandemic with 70 executive orders is that, if you recall, former Senator Kennelly led a group of individuals that were healthcare minded, and the goal of which they succeeded was to fund local government and local public health departments. And not everybody felt as though all 92 would be funded and would be a part of the new project, the new system, but all 92 did join in, and they were funded. And it was all about hospitals and public health departments talking to each other and with best practices, and so much was siloed. And then in the following budget, the Brown administration didn't defund it, but slashed probably 50 to 75% of the funding that was there. And so we were left with a state, local government, a state, and a federal government that had just gone through a horrendous pandemic where millions were affected by this, and many passed away from it. But nobody knew where it came from, why it happened, and there's so many voices shouting out into the ether, into social media, and that no one knew who to follow. and no one knew who to believe. Trust and credibility have left the building.
Our guest on the program today is our good buddy, former Republican State Senator Jim Merritt, co-host of State House Happenings, the program that you can hear online that he and Rob Kendall and I both do. Jim just wrote a new book, Lessons Learned Are Ready for the Next Pandemic. History Says No. And he examined not only the COVID-19 pandemic, what we most recently experienced, but also previous pandemics as well. Jim, so which was worse, the Black Plague, typhoid Mary, or this?
Well, this is a combination of a history book as well as an awareness book. The history is the first two chapters, and then the final chapter is I bring solutions to the table. And no book has been written like this. There are about 34 experts that kind of joined in and wrote a pamphlet. But all the books on COVID are, in general, they were written in 21 and 22 and 23, but it was right in the midst of what was happening, and I gave it time to breathe, and I come with solutions. And in the first chapter, we talk about the actual, like you said, it goes back to Black Death, and I go through of what we learned from the different pandemics that we experience in this world and the world of time. All the way up to the Spanish flu, and most people now know, and this is relatively knowledge that we have discovered, is more people died in World War I from the Spanish flu than they did on the battlefield. The idea of the President Wilson, Woodrow Wilson, who was the sitting president, got sick at the peace talks and wanted his League of Nations, and really actually died from complications from the Spanish flu. We know that Franklin Delano Roosevelt, when he was Assistant Secretary of the Navy, was in the hospital for 2 weeks with Spanish flu. And so you have Woodrow Wilson dying of the Spanish flu, and Roosevelt surviving it. But it was if Roosevelt hadn't in his term of office started talking about the art of science and government starting to invest in science instead of foundations and Harvard and Johns Hopkins, I don't know where we would be, because Germany at the time in the 1880s all the way up to 1920, they had been putting lots of government money into science and research, and had really benefited from it, Abdul. And so I go through all those, but most times and witness the idea of the Spanish flu, it was all swept under the rug. And since the Spanish flu, we've had 17 threats of pandemics, and really not learned from anything, because the stockpile goes down of all the equipment that you need in a pandemic, and things get defunded, and there's just people feel like they need to fund something other than public health, and it's developed into that. You walk up to somebody on the street, Abdul, and say, if society gets told to shelter in place, to shut down, you can't go to the grocery, you can't go to the gym, you can't go to church, what would you do? And they say, well, first of all, it's not going to happen. Well, yes, you have to be prepared for the unknown.
Exactly.
But two, people would say, I'm not staying home again. And that's because the truth has been not told, and there's no credibility, and there's fear.
Our guest on the program today is our good friend, former Republican State Senator Jim Merritt, now a private citizen, also co-host of State House Happenings. Jim has written a new book about not only the COVID-19 pandemic we experienced 6 years ago, but also how this fit in line with other pandemics. The name of the book is called Lessons Learned. Are we ready for the next pandemic? History says no. Jim, it's interesting because I want to say it's interesting in the sense that, on the one hand, we had the Black Plague, we had typhoid, Spanish flu, and COVID. And one of the easiest ways to avoid COVID is to wash your hands. Mm-hmm. And if you go back to the Black Plague, that's literally what it was. It was ticks on rats and no real sanitary conditions that wiped out nearly a fourth of the U.S. population. Like, just wash your hands in a
very
very
commonsensical. And with the solutions, one solution that I have offered to the reader is the idea of testing wastewater in a local government, if you will. And that can tell you exactly what is going on in your society with illness. And there are plenty more, but I like to talk about the positives that came out of it, telehealth,
and also Zoom, for that matter.
Exactly. Society adjusted very, very well with a god awful amount of people dying from it. But the human genome, that will help us in the future if it's used right, to focus on if a city starts having an illness, you can track and you can find and you can solve, so it doesn't spread around the globe. And there are just so many. There's so many ways. Mitch Daniels, when he was at Purdue, and I go into this in the book, they did an outstanding job in August of 2020 with everybody coming back to campus. And I talk in the book about success stories, and others I talk about. There was a part of an executive order that the governor signed that you couldn't swim within 6 feet of another person in a pool or a body of water like a lake. And we point out some really silly parts around the world that people felt like they can guard. But I get into education and how those kids that were in 2020 who were either at home learning off online, many of them don't want to be in a classroom setting or don't want to be in a crowd. And so, we're going to have problems with autoimmune symptoms and situations with health. And so what this book does, it shakes people up, and hopefully it's a clarion call for society to step up and understand what happened and tell everybody the truth, the unvarnished, what we did right and what we did wrong. And I think that's how those are the lessons learned, that we can be prepared next time. And if somebody that is a notable in a church comes in and says, I think we need to recognize what the government is telling us, if it's something that hurts or harms civil liberties, maybe somebody in that church is noteworthy enough that people would follow them. Because right now, our leaders, if they had to go into a situation where they had to tell us something along the lines of, you have to go home and stay home, I don't think people would follow that direction.
Jim Merritt with us. Jim, co-host of State House Happenings, along with myself and Rob Kendall. Also, Jim's the author of the new book, Lessons Learned. Are we ready for the next pandemic? History says no. It's a book not only about COVID-19, but also the Antonine Plague, HIV, SARS, Ebola, you name it. Jim's written about it.
It's on Amazon.com, and you're so gracious of being on Merritt in the Morning with Klopp and me at times. And so I'm very serious about this. And I've talked to a lot of media outlets, and what I'm trying to do is stir up people and people start asking questions of our government leaders of public health and what we're going to do and how we're going to warn people, how we're going to protect people, and what's going to happen in the future. Because after every pandemic, there's a lull. And then people scoot. There's a lull, thinking, we're sad about it. We people passed away, but we want to move on, and that happens way too much in our society.
Jim, we talk about sort of the sort of thought leaders, opinion makers, obviously kind of sort of leading the charge to inform the public. What do you do about those folks who don't believe in vaccinations? Lieutenant Governor was a big anti COVID-19, vaccination. Obviously, people have their religious beliefs and religious freedoms. We want to respect that. But there comes a point where I say, your religious freedom stops at my nose.
Right. And that's actually happened. And hopefully, but not hopefully, I expect in the future that American government, the federal government, will test mask. What is the very best mask for whatever is ailing us? Japan did that and did it really, really well. And for instance, there's an arm of the Army, U.S. Army, that understands infection, it understands pandemics, it understands healthcare, and a lot like Operation Warp Speed. That if we had to do it over again, that is the entity, that's the arm of the government, arm of the U.S. Army that I talk about in the book that should be assigned the saving of America and the world from the next pandemic, because the Army is highly respected. You see Raising Cane, Dan Kane, a wonderful general, talking about Iran, and people believe him. The Army is to believe, and they like it or not, the vaccination, Operation Warp Speed was a massive success. Now, to those people who are worried about going to church, worried about their civil liberties, and I honor that, and that makes me redouble my efforts to stress that we need an authority that is respected, that has credibility, that can say to the populace, this is what needs to happen. And all the noise around that individual or that body has to be shoved away, because with COVID, everybody had an opinion, and we were flying by the seat of our pants. And so
I would say, my friend, we were literally building the airplane as we were flying it.
We were, and this is not a criticism of Governor Holcomb, but we need better communication. He had at his beck and call Facebook Live at 1:30 after lunch to talk to Indiana. Well, at that time, Indiana only had 65% coverage of broadband, so he was only talking to 65% of Indiana. He really didn't organize the legislature who could be his mouthpiece, and it just didn't happen that way. And so the whole idea is, let's look at what happened and let's improve ourselves. And the only way we can do that is admit fault, admit wrong, and tell everybody exactly what happened. And let's move on, and let's be prepared next time.
Jim, by the way, our good friend Republican State Senator Jim Merritt, our guest on the program today, we're talking about 6 years after COVID-19. Jim has written a new book called Lessons Learned. Are we ready for the next pandemic? And Jim says, no, looking at past pandemics. And once again, I always say, Jim, if you want to know what somebody's going to do today, look at what they did yesterday.
Yes, and David McCullough, the famous author, I read in a book once that one of his quotes was, let's see, history tells us how to behave, and meaning, history repeats itself, and it will repeat itself again.
Jim, when we look at history sort of repeating itself, what are some of the things that your book came up with to sort of deal with the next pandemic? And I know a big thing has been restoring trust in government institutions. I know that's a big deal right now. Just look at our current political landscape. No one trusts the government. How many of your former colleagues have primary challenges because people don't trust the government these days? Help us out here.
Well, I think one part of this is our children. And early on in COVID, it was quite clear that the infection or the suffering of COVID, kids were not catching it. It was not something that attacked the younger set. It attacked senior citizens and those that had underlying illnesses, and in a very violent way. And so early on, we should have, and this should have happened, is those individuals, those kids should have gotten back into school almost immediately, and figured out a way where adults that were teaching them could have communicated with them and taught them, but they could actually be in a classroom in a community type of situation. And we didn't do that. Many states had schools closed forever, and that was the wrong thing to do, and we're paying for it. Another thing that I'm very concerned about is, but albeit the vaccination or COVID itself, the autoimmune systems have been knocked down a little bit in Americans and probably people around the country who have had COVID. And that's something that is going to be healthcare on an ongoing basis. We need to study that and be prepared for people having a damaged autoimmune system. The idea of mental health. There are a lot of people who died by suicide because of loneliness, and we have got to be prepared for the idea that mental health is something that is mental health is health, and we've got to be prepared, as well as helping our urban or our rural hospitals. And federal government just sent $1 billion to Indiana rural hospitals, but that's going to go away really quick. How are we going to install telehealth in a much larger way? And so there are a lot of things that I learned that I want everybody else to learn coming out of the pandemic that can be done right. Mitch Daniels did it right at Purdue, bringing a university back. That can be brought back in K through 12 as well. And so we just need to learn from history. And we also need to, nobody likes to admit they're wrong, but we need our government. We need the people in charge to become authorities and be respected authorities and understand that maybe it wasn't them, but government did things right and they did things wrong during this, and we can't repeat it. And I know that COVID may not, it may be the next one, and Spanish flu was like this. Spanish flu affected everybody, including children. That may be happening next time, but we need to make a very, very quick analysis next time, and that who this affects, and then adjust accordingly. And there can't be so many noisy gongs out there. There has to be an authority and it can't be the CDC. The CDC looks backward, Abdul. They don't look forward, and they're the wrong entity to be at the tip of the spear of protecting society.
Our good friend Jim Merritt, former Republican State Senator with us, author of Lessons Learned. Are we ready for the next pandemic? History says no. It's a book you can find at Amazon.com. So like I said, Jim looked at not only COVID, he looked at the plagues in the Roman Empire, 1918 influenza, HIV, to SARS, to Ebola, the whole nine yards. Jim, one thing as we get ready to sort of wind down our conversation here, one thing that it wasn't, okay, with this pandemic, it wasn't just the pandemic itself that impacted people who caught it. It was also the people whose loved ones. You may remember we lost my dad, due to COVID complications, and he was always sort of healthy, but being African American male with certain genetic predispositions for certain types of things, we had to bury our father about that. But still, COVID just wasn't the people who got sick and then got better.
Right. And I thought a lot about not being vaccinated. Number one, because I think, like you, I have some libertarian leanings. But
I got my vaccination anyway. So, and also remember too, I wasn't necessarily worried about COVID because I told my wife, honey, I have enough alcohol, tobacco, and THC in my bloodstream. There's no room for COVID. COVID's going to show up like no vacancy. Go to the next body. So
right. Well, my parents were 90 plus years old, but actually not. It was 6 years ago, so they're in their late 80s, and I'm around them a lot, and I was lifting my mom a lot, and so I thought it was best that I get vaccinated. And there's a kind of a funny story about my mom and dad getting vaccinated. They were down at their home in Sanibel, and they couldn't find a place to get vaccinated, and everybody had to go through a grocery store phone system in Florida. And so a friend of a friend was in charge of a senior citizen housing structure or organization in Naples, Florida. And so I got a password, and my mom and dad snuck into this housing complex and got vaccinated, and then went back 30 days later and got vaccinated. And they're on Sanibel Island, and nothing moves quickly on Sanibel Island, including a pandemic. But anyway, that was by hook or crook. We got my mom and dad vaccinated, and I did so as well. And we just need an authority, Abdul, that was respected, that understands what happened and what did not happen, and to be prepared next time.
Jim, we got about 90 seconds left here. When someone picks up the book, what do you hope they take away from it?
Well, I hope that part of the book is a metaphor about a community and a tree, and the metaphor is if a tree is going to grow and flourish, you're going to need to water it, and you're going to need to have fresh soil around it. And the metaphor is a community. You have to have truth, and you have to have less fear, if you will, because a lot of fear is involved in this. And a community that is cogent, cohesive, that understands and respects the leaders, and does the right things to make a community grow is a lot like the nourishment for a tree. Because if a tree doesn't have nourishment, it's going to die. And if a community doesn't have truth, and it doesn't have trust, and it is full of fear, a community will die. A country will die.
All right. Well, our guest on the program today has been our good friend, former Republican State Senator Jim Merritt. Jim, the author of a new book, Lessons Learned. Are we ready for the next pandemic? History says no. You can pick it up at Amazon.com. Jim, my friend, sir, thank you very much for taking a few minutes to chat with us. And by the way, you look great in your casual clothes in your office there. I turned my camera off because I don't want anybody to see the mess that's behind me. So, plus my wife would kill me if he just ever got out.
Bless her heart. But thank you, Abdul.
Give me 1 second here.